Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to tackle some seriously big questions today?
Always up for a challenge. Let's do it.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to be talking about the universe, the origins of life, and even get into how our own brains evolved.
Some pretty heady stuff. And we've got some really cool sources to dig into today, blending science and philosophy in a way that I think you'll find really thought-provoking.
Okay, so before we get too deep into the cosmos, let's start with something a little closer to home, ourselves. I mean, we're all here listening, thinking, experiencing this very moment, right?
Right. And that seemingly simple observation actually leads us to a really powerful philosophical idea. Descartes' famous, "I think, therefore I am."
I've definitely heard that phrase before.
Uh,
But to be honest, I'm not sure I totally get it. How does thinking prove that we exist?
well, think about it this way. Even if everything else we experience is an illusion, even if some mischievous demon is trying to trick us about the nature of reality, the very fact that we can think, that we can doubt, proves that there's something there doing the thinking.
Okay, I see what you mean. So even if we're being deceived, the act of being deceived means there has to be a deceiver, a self that's being tricked. It's kind of a mind-bending thought.
It is, and it gets even more mind-bending when we start to think about the nature of reality itself. Because we as humans tend to perceive reality through the lens of distinctions.
Distinctions. Like, what do you mean by that?
We divide the world up into categories, right? Like me versus you thought versus feeling inside versus outside. These distinctions help us make sense of things, but they can also limit our understanding.
So you're saying that by breaking things down into separate pieces, we might be missing the bigger picture, the underlying unity of it all.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really intriguing concept, the idea that reality itself might be something vast, boundless, even infinite.
Infinite. So you're saying that no matter how much we learn, how many categories we create, we'll never be able to fully grasp the true nature of reality.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? Because it suggests that our attempts to represent reality will always fall short.
Yeah.
That there's always more to discover.
It's definitely a lot to wrap your head around. So how does this idea of infinity connect to, well, everything else? I mean, we're talking about the universe, right?
Exactly. And that's where things start to get really exciting, because this concept of infinity applies not just to abstract ideas, but to the physical universe itself.
Okay, so paint me a picture here.
Yeah.
How do we visualize an infinite universe?
Picture a giant grid stretching out forever in all directions. This is what we call the size-time diagram. It helps us wrap our minds around the sheer scale of the cosmos.
A grid with no end. So every planet, every star, every galaxy fits somewhere on this infinite grid.
Precisely. And it gets even more mind-blowing when you consider where we humans fit into all of this. We're just this tiny blip on this vast cosmic canvas.
A tiny blip in an infinite universe.
Wow.
That really puts things into perspective.
It does, and it makes you wonder what else might be out there in the vastness of space. I mean, if the universe is truly infinite, then the possibilities are literally endless.
Okay, now you're really getting my imagination going. So we've got this infinite universe, this endless expanse of space and time. What else does this size-time diagram tell us?
Well, it helps us understand the relationship between energy, mass, and space-time. And that's where Einstein's famous equation, E=mc² comes into play.
Oh yeah, EMCT, I remember that from physics class. But honestly, it always seemed kind of abstract to me, like something that only applied in a laboratory setting.
And that's a common misconception. But here's the thing. E=mc² isn't just true in some specific situations. It's true everywhere and always, even in the seemingly empty vastness of space.
Wait, really? So even in the parts of the universe where there's no stuff, no planets or stars, EMCT still applies?
Absolutely. Because this equation isn't just describing some random relationship between energy and mass. It's telling us that they're fundamentally connected like two sides of the same coin.
So energy can become mass and mass can become energy, like some kind of cosmic alchemy.
Exactly. And this has some really profound implications for how we understand the universe. Because if EMC-LM is true everywhere, even in the absence of matter, then it means that the potential for energy and mass exists everywhere.
Okay, so walk me through this. How does EMC-LM apply to, well, nothingness?
Imagine the size range of the universe expanding, right?
Yeah.
It stretches out, getting emptier as it goes towards infinity. But even then, EMC-LM would still be true, meaning even in a theoretical empty universe, the potential for energy and mass would still exist. It can't just be a mentioned idea, it has to exist.
So even in the absence of stuff, the seeds of energy and mass are still there waiting to sprout. Does that mean the Big Bang, that incredibly dense explosion of energy mass, was inevitable?
That's one way to look at it. Because EMC-LM was true everywhere in space-time. Simultaneously, the Big Bang had to happen. It's like the universe couldn't help itself.
Wow, okay. That's a lot to process. We've got this infinite universe governed by this fundamental equation that links energy and mass, and it all kicked off with the Big Bang. Where do we go from here?
So from the Big Bang, we get stars and galaxies, planets, and eventually life.
It's such a huge leap from this massive explosion of energy to tiny single-celled organisms. How do we even begin to explain that?
Right. It's a question that has fascinated scientists for centuries, and there are still many mysteries to unravel. But here's a way to think about it. Imagine the very first reproducing shape.
The first, what, reproducing shape?
Yeah, it might have been something incredibly simple, a molecule, or even something more basic that we haven't discovered yet. The key is that it could create copies of itself.
Okay, I can kind of picture that. So this self-replicating thing is floating around in the primordial soup. What happens next?
Well, as soon as you have replication, you have the potential for variation, and that's where evolution kicks in. It's like hitting the play button on an incredible journey of change and adaptation.
And not just change, but competition, right? Because now you've got multiple copies of this shape, all vying for resources, trying to survive and create even more copies.
You got it. And that brings us to a fascinating aspect of evolution that often gets overlooked: power.
Power. I usually think of power in terms of human societies and politics.
Mhm.
How does that apply to a simple molecule?
Think about it. Even at the most basic level, life is about gaining an advantage. It's about manipulating your environment or even other organisms to ensure your survival and reproduction.
So even a tiny molecule can exert power in its own way.
Absolutely. Take viruses, for example. Those tiny packets of genetic material hijack cells to reproduce. They're essentially manipulating other organisms to do their bidding. That's power in action.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. So this drive for power has been shaping life from the very beginning.
Exactly. And it's had a profound impact on the trajectory of evolution. Think about those early fish that developed sharp teeth and aggressive behaviors. That wasn't just about survival. It was about competing for resources for mates, asserting their dominance.
It's like an arms race of evolution, each generation trying to outdo the last in the quest for power.
Exactly. And this brings us to the evolution of our own species, because even in our lineage, the drive for power played a key role in shaping who we are today.
Okay, so how did all this struggle for power lead to the development of those big, amazing brains we humans have?
Well, our brains didn't just gradually get bigger over time. There was a period of rapid expansion, a kind of growth spurt that happened a few 100,000 years ago.
A growth spurt. So what triggered that?
A major factor was the emergence of complex social hierarchies. Think about the challenges of navigating a society where some individuals have more power and status than others. You need to remember who understands social cues, plan your actions carefully, and sometimes even manipulate others to get what you want.
That definitely requires some serious brain power.
It does, and that's why the cortex, the part of the brain responsible for higher level thinking, expanded so rapidly. It was being sculpted by the demands of social life.
So it was like an intelligence arms race. The more complex the social structure, the more you needed a powerful brain to succeed.
Precisely. And this pressure to outsmart your rivals, to climb the social ladder, drove the evolution of our incredible human minds. But there's another crucial ingredient in this recipe for intelligence: language.
Language. Of course. We humans are obsessed with talking and writing. But how did language contribute to this brain power boost?
As our ancestors developed more complex social structures, they needed better ways to communicate, to share information, coordinate their actions. And that's where language comes in.
So it wasn't just about bigger brains. It was about the ability to use those brains to communicate and cooperate with others.
Exactly. Language gave us the ability to represent abstract concepts, to talk about things that weren't physically present, to tell stories, create shared narratives. It opened up whole new worlds of thought and possibility.
And it probably played a role in our ability to form complex societies, right? I mean, imagine trying to organize a large group of people without language. It would be chaos.
It would. And it's amazing to think how far we've come from those early grunts and gestures to the incredibly nuanced and sophisticated languages we use today. It's a testament to the power of evolution and the remarkable adaptability of the human brain.
Absolutely. So we've gone from the Big Bang to the evolution of language, and it all seems so interconnected, like one grand unfolding story.
It is, and it gets even more fascinating when we start to explore how different parts of the brain interact with each other. Because it's not just this linear progression, it's more like a complex dance, a sort of mutual parasitism, as our sources describe it. Mutual parasitism. That sounds a little ominous. What exactly does that mean in terms of our brains?
Yeah, it makes it sound like there's some kind of internal struggle going on up there.
In a way, there is. You see, the cortex, that newer part of the brain we were talking about, relies on the older, more primitive parts for information about our internal state.
Hmm.
Things like our emotions, our drives, our basic needs.
Okay, so the cortex needs input from the older parts of the brain to make sense of what's going on inside of us.
Right. But here's the twist. The older parts of the brain also rely on the cortex. They need it to interpret the world, to plan actions, to navigate complex social situations. It's like this two-way street.
So they need each other,
Yeah.
but they also kind of compete for control.
Exactly. And that explains why we sometimes make decisions that seem irrational or illogical. Our cortex might come up with a perfectly sensible plan, but then our old brain throws a tantrum because it doesn't get what it wants. And suddenly we're making choices based on fear or desire instead of careful reasoning.
It's like that old saying, my head says one thing, but my heart says another. We've all been there.
We have. And this interplay is happening all the time below the level of conscious awareness. It's shaping our perceptions, our decisions, even our sense of who we are.
So we're not just products of our genes or our environment. We're also products of this constant back and forth between different parts of our brains.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to understand how our brains work, so we can make more conscious choices, manage our emotions more effectively, and ultimately live more fulfilling lives.
Well, I don't know about you, but after this deep dive, I'm definitely feeling a lot more aware of what's going on inside my own head.
Me too. It's fascinating stuff. And we've really only scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
We started with the Big Bang, journeyed to the origins of life, explored the evolution of our brains, even touched on the complex relationship between our thoughts and emotions. It's been quite a ride.
It has. But before we wrap things up, I'd like to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question.
Go for it.
We began with that powerful statement, I think, therefore I am. We explored the vastness of the universe, the intricate dance of evolution, and even the forces that shaped your own mind. Now, knowing all of this, how does it change your perspective on your own life and your place in this grand cosmic scheme of things?
Wow, that's a big one.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about all those connections we've been talking about. The infinite universe,
Yeah.
the incredible power of Imsalidia, the drive for survival that led to the development of intelligence. And ultimately, it all leads back to us right here, right now.
Exactly. You're a product of billions of years of cosmic and biological evolution, a unique point of consciousness existing at this precise moment in space-time.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it. It's humbling and awe-inspiring at the same time. It makes you feel incredibly small, but also incredibly connected to everything around us.
And here's the most amazing part. The story isn't over. With every thought you have, every choice you make, you're actively participating in the ongoing narrative of the universe.
So it's not just about understanding the universe, it's about shaping it, contributing to this grand, unfolding story with our own actions and experiences.
Precisely. And that's a powerful realization. It gives us a sense of responsibility, but also a sense of wonder. We're not just passive observers in this cosmic drama. We're active participants, co-creators of our own reality.
I love that co-creators of our own reality. Yeah. It's like we have this incredible opportunity, this privilege to shape the universe with our thoughts, our actions, our very existence.
And who knows, maybe someday your unique perspective will contribute something truly remarkable to the grand narrative of the universe.
What a thought. Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end on. We started with, I think, therefore I am, and ended up exploring the vastness of existence and our role in it all. It's been an incredible journey.
It certainly has. And for our listeners, remember, this is just the beginning of your own explorations. Keep pondering, keep questioning, keep seeking out new knowledge and experiences.
And as always, keep diving deep.